she shifts a little bit to the left. So if you were gonna do that little natal fold, you would see more of the body on the right where that, because I'm pretty sure, Maureen, your primary curve is your thoracic, right? And that's something we didn't get to. Most people will have one curve that's the primary and the rest are just compensatory. You will see some people that have what they call a double primary, and what that means is they do exercises as they do like a roll down, that one doesn't go away.
I think mine's 59 and 47.
Yeah, so you're actually you're relatively even as a matter of fact. Can I have you do a little standing roll down?
Sure.
Now, this is not advised, of course, for people that have osteoporosis, so, can you take your hands and put them, or does that not feel good because of your shoulder? So if you pause right here, you can see, a little higher to the ceiling here, a little lower here. Now soften your knees and keep going. You're almost there, right here, in that lumbar. A little closer to the ceiling on the left, a little more lordotic on the right. And here you also get a view of the fact that the hip is translated a little bit to the left. And again, these are because you can't just have one curve or you'd be walking side bend. You have to balance it out above and below. You can come back on up. If you'll, well, no, we don't have to get out there. We'll slow down. I barely know how to use it. So this is a really classic 3-curve spine. So these are, I wanted to get to, we're going to be at item 9, contraindications. So here's where we get to the part that's practical application for you. What are things that are or are not a good idea? And we're going to start with the things that are not a good idea. And the first one is what I just had Maureen do. So I have to laugh. It's like, you have scoliosis, no end range spinal flexion. You have osteoporosis, no end range spinal flexion. What's the first thing I ask people to do? Can I have you do a standing roll down? Because I have to get a look at it, right?
So one of my favorite things that feels good to me is to put my hands on the floor when I bend over it, and I keep my knees locked, and I can do it, and it feels so good because it releases my low back.
And we're gonna get, see, and this is why I can tell you, but I can't tell you from the experience of really living with this body.
So you couldn't see, is it as clearly, or you just couldn't see it all if she, bent over, put her hands on the wall, and was like in a flat back position? You wouldn't be able to see the
Not as much.
Okay.
It's the roll down.
okay.
The roll, because what you wanna do is you wanna be looking
It's too obvious when you do a roll down.
parallel to the floor.
Gotcha.
You wanna get your look, now you still might see it, but that roll down,
But to really
if
get,
you think you're seeing something, and this is something that you all can do, right? If you think you're seeing something in a client, you can have them sit. If they're female, most of our clients are, have them cross their arms because we need to get a better view of their ribs, and women just tend to be a little narrower. And have them do that roll down, right? And if one side is much higher to the ceiling, you don't have to go all the way down. Pop them right back up, and then you can ask your little question, right? Like, I just felt like maybe somewhere along here, I just saw just a little something. And just see if they bite, right? In either direction. So you will just watch Maureen do her spinal flexion. Why do you think that's not a good idea?
It exaggerates.
Well, it exaggerates it, but it also doesn't do it evenly. Like when we're taking a symmetrical spine, and when we're having it do a roll down, we're looking to take that lumbar curve and have it meet the thoracic, right? We're trying to kind of bridge that gap. Well, if one side of your lumbar is higher than the other, and if one side of your thoracic is higher than the other, how's that gonna work? You follow me? Each side has a different need. So you can't get that lovely meld. You're not gonna get that fluid line because that body can't do that. It also probably doesn't feel so good. Yeah. The next thing is going to be extension. And can I have you model this?
Sure.
So it would make more sense to use the middle caddy, but as typical for me, I've held all my stuff on it. So I'm gonna have you come here. And not if it's gonna hurt you, but let's do a little swan. You're gonna move your brain to the side, you're gonna slide your hands back, elbows up to the ceiling, reach your legs nice and long, navel to spine, pubic bone into that caddy. And let's do a little swan here. And remember, as we're working with clients, spines. What's our goal? Is to take that thoracic spine and to let it sink until it meets the lumbar. Well, she's higher on one side than the other. This side has a very different knee than this side. Does that hurt or just feel uncomfortable or weird?
Uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because you're not getting the even glide. Again, when one side's a little kyphotic and one's a little lordotic, you're not going to be able to take that spine and have the kyphosis of the thoracic spine reversed, or not reversed, but flatten out just enough to meet the lumbar. It can't do it. One side's already sunk, one's more lifted. Now here's what you can do. What you can do is the buff bone space float. It doesn't get better than that. So you can either keep your hands like this or you can go to the goalpost hands, whichever's more comfortable for you. Something that everybody that comes in here could stand to work on is better neck mechanics. Think about how many times you ask somebody to lift their face and they do this, right? I used to be the queen of that, and one time Molly looked at me and she's like, "You're not a Pez dispenser. I'm not waiting for candy to shoot out of your neck." And I thought that was hilarious, but also really apt. So if you've got somebody who, and this could be for somebody who's like really kyphotic too, right? Somebody who is even side to side, but just has more of an upper thoracic kyphosis than you would expect, because they can't do that type of extension either. It hurts, their body just doesn't do it. So here's something to work on. I learned this from, this is a mashup of something I learned from Julie Game and the buff bone space float. You're gonna put those arms in a goalpost position, and I'm gonna ask Marie to keep her chest nice and open and to float her hands. You're gonna keep her spine stable, and she's gonna lower down. So we're just trying to work on the shoulder, because remember, that right shoulder, and I do have this big time, that right shoulder is gonna be more internally rotated. Because of the way the spine has been pulled back, everything else doesn't get as long, so there's like a grab that pulls the shoulder forward. We're gonna do that a couple times. We're gonna inhale to lift and exhale to lower, and then we'll add another step. Inhale to float your hands, and now float your elbows. Stay nice and wide here.
I can't float the.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, I
That's
forgot,
okay.
Marina's nursing a little rotator cuff, humbly, so this is what you'd be working on, and we're just trying to rotate the shoulder a couple different ways, keeping the chest nice and open. But here's the part that's really key, and I'm gonna have you keep your hands down, because I forgot about that, you're too much of a trooper. I'm gonna have you float your face. You're not gonna change where your neck, where you're looking. What you're gonna do is you're gonna slide your lower jaw up towards your spine. See how those first couple vertebrae just below C7 lift a tiny bit? And then she's gonna lower down. That's safe. We're not working on lifting up even to the base of the ribs, much less further. What we are doing is trying to strengthen the neck.
So is that like a Z translation?
Yes,
That's, okay.
only, maybe taken a tiny bit further, because you saw with Maureen that when she did the space float, maybe the first thoracic vertebra or two got involved. And the way you're gonna wanna cue that is with length, always length, with everything length, and we're gonna get to that in just a second. So thank you. And now if you wanna stand up for me, and I'm not, well, you can do just a part of this. The other thing you don't wanna do, and I hate to start with the don'ts, so I'm trying to give you a couple replacement exercises as we go, because I know what that's like. You start looking at the list and it's like, what am I gonna do for an hour? The next don't is your big side bend. And why do you think that's not such a great idea? If you already side bend to the left, do we need to encourage that more?
No.
Now this one's counterintuitive, and I threw out a book because of this. I did. I was reading through it and I was very impressed, and I got to this, and I thought the advice was so bad that it went straight into the bin. It seems like it's really logical. It's like, well, let's just push that curve out by going in the opposite direction. Maureen, how does that feel for you?
I don't like that.
Maureen doesn't like that, and she's such a trooper, right? That she did this in class. Like, we would get to mermaid and Maureen just did it. And the honest truth is, it's not dangerous necessarily. If you've got a minor curve, you can do it. But here's the risk. Because your muscles aren't symmetrical, you go to take yourself to this side, and I'm gonna do this so that you don't hurt yourself.
Thank you.
You go to this side and you're taking muscles that are already shorter, and you're stretching the heck out of them. Think about the rubber band that you pull. What happens when you let go? You come into rebound. And the other day, it was a long day, and I've been demonstrating this in like every class, and I got to the last one, and I went up and over, and this side of my back just spazzed, and I thought, oh, that's that rebound thing that I've been telling people about. It happened. Here's what you can do. One is from Buff Bones. You can, I'm gonna have you stand for this if you
That's
don't mind.
fine, I'm happy to.
You're gonna stand with your feet parallel, fist distance apart. She's gonna glide one arm up. Now, if somebody has significant kyphosis, you don't have to make them lift their arms straight up to the ceiling. Watch the ribs. If they look like their shoulder doesn't feel good, or if their ribs are flaring, let them have that arm a little further forward. That'll take care of a lot of things. And then lift your second arm.
So I don't have a problem.
Oh, or don't. So pretend. Pretend like that arm is up.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask Maureen to take a nice inhale and lift this arm. And then we're gonna pretend we're not really doing it. She would lift the other side. The cues from Buff Bones for this are to feel like you're climbing a rope, but the key is we are not doing lateral flexion here.
I can do some of it.
We're reaching. We're focusing on that whole sideline, getting longer on one side and longer on the other, but we're pulling into our deep low abdominals the whole time. And in fact, one of the cues is don't side bend, because you'll see people get into this and they feel like they should move more, so they'll go like here and then here. Another thing you can do, if it feels good for your client, if they love side bending, and then you find out later that like sometimes afterwards, because you told me, right, that like it didn't feel good afterwards, and I was like, Maureen, tell me. What you can do with that is you can do a standing side bend, where you go to one side, and if you think of it as a reach, and this is a mashup of like 5 different exercises maybe, and then you pick yourself up, so you'll notice I'm trying to use my hand at all times. I'm feeling the press down, because that's gonna keep me from collapsing. Then I flip my palm to the ceiling, and I lift up, because I'm focusing on length. And before I go to the other side, I'm gonna lace my fingers together, and I'm gonna lift all bones. I'm always gonna recenter. And again, we're gonna come to that principle in a minute. You go to one side, just a little bit, tell people it's a reach. It's not how far over can you go. It's how much can you reach your head and then your shoulders and then your uppermost back towards the seam between the wall and the ceiling away from you. And that will keep them from doing this. And then you're gonna lift up and you're gonna lift all back bones. That little pause in the middle, for some people, will allow them to do something similar to a mermaid that won't bring them into a rebound. Okay, rotation. Why is rotation not a good idea?
It could already be rotated.
You're already
Right, you're already
rotating.
rotating.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't have much of a curve, but I've got enough. You ask me to go this way, and I just keep going and going and going. That's where I live. You ask me to go this way, I don't go as far. It doesn't feel great, and I'm going to run the risk of that rebound again, right? Because you're asking a side that's already short to stretch well beyond, just getting level is, for somebody who lives here, just coming level is work. Asking them to go past and to rotate to the other side, not good, it's too much. The rule that Karina taught me was if somebody tells you, that was a great stretch, it's probably too much, back off. You want just an okay stretch, a mediocre stretch, because it's safer, right? Okay, sideline is not a don't, but it is a proceed with caution. And this is another one where I didn't know that this was an issue until I started asking questions from my training, and Maureen was like, oh yeah, I always feel like I'm suffocating. This
Other than
was
that, it felt great. It's just,
Other than
breathing
that-
was a little bit of a problem.
other than the breathing thing. And this resulted in me throwing out another book. I didn't even put it in the giveaway pile. It's like, I don't want anybody to read this, it's wrong. So, I can ask Maureen to lay down on her shorter side, but we have to be careful. So if you side bend left, that's gonna be the left, so I'm gonna have you lay down on your left side.
I hope.
Yeah, but I'm gonna ask her to lengthen her spine as she goes. Like, not to just flop down, but to really reach. And honestly, if this were a real session, I would be putting a wedge underneath her waistline, because that's the side, if you side bend, you think, oh, it's gonna be nicely lifted off of the caddy, but it's not. That side is side bending when you stand. When you lay down, it's just gonna kind of give up the ghost. So you're gonna wanna support that underside to keep it long, and then you're probably gonna have to support this shoulder too. And we can do side bending there, so that's just a matter of making sure your client is comfortable and making sure that they lay down, trying to feel like they're, dropping one bone at a time, reaching in the direction of their head. And you can come up now. And we'll put this on the map.
Okay.
When you come on the right side, again, one of my books was like, oh, it's great. If you're side bending to the left, you're gonna lay on your right side, it's gonna push you right back to neutral. Let's do all kinds of side lying on the right. Oh Lord, that's a bad idea. Because you're already rotated here, right? So if you're rotated, you're already like a little bigger forward to back. So what's gonna happen when you've got the weight of your body on top of it? Well, Maureen will tell you. How do you feel when you lay on your right side?
Like you're squished.
She feels like she's suffocating. And I mean, it's not that you feel like it.
It's just how you breathe.
It's just she is. It's the side that's already a little more compressed. That chamber isn't as wide as we would like it to be because that rotation has made it bigger forward, right, front to back, so it's not as big side to side. Then you lay on it, and you have the rest of the weight of your body on top of it, and you're gonna make that side to side at dimension even bigger, which means your side to side dimension is gonna be even smaller. So I'm not expecting you all to be able to do this with clients, but if you see me do it, you'll know what the heck is going on. And I figure at some point in time what'll probably happen is you'll have clients that maybe have some spinal curves, and maybe they'll like come in and do a couple sessions with me and we'll figure out what their modifications are, and then they'll know, and then they'll come back to you in their group class and they'll know what to do. So if I were gonna have Maureen do side lying legs on her right,
Like you did this morning?
like we did this morning, she's not gonna lay on those right ribs. She's gonna put her pelvis on a bus, and let's pretend like we're doing bending work so that you're not having to balance yourself as much. She's gonna have a forearm on the mat, and now she can work on keeping that right shoulder on the back, not being internally rotated. This position actually really facilitates that, on having this shoulder come back, and on finding length on her shorter side, because we're not letting this sink down. So that's gonna be a way that you can do side lying legs with somebody who has a thoracic curve. You feel comfortable coming up?
And that was your right side because you,
Because the right side,
It's weird because of the twist, it's like the opposite.
right
Yes.
side is the side where Marine's ribs come back further in your hand.
okay,
You don't wanna lay on that side because we're already
okay,
not as wide side to side as we would like to be, because we have more of that front to back.
gotcha.
It's really counterintuitive. This was a trick question that Karina asked, like at hour 20. What do you think? Would that be a good idea? And everybody was like, yeah. And she's like, let's consider the ribs. And everybody went, oh. Like, this stuff is complicated. Okay. The other thing is, and you all just did this yourself, why do you think single leg work isn't such a great idea? You're totally unstable. So you've got somebody barking at you, keep that pelvis stable, and you're like, I can't. I just can't. Unless your client is wedged, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, they can't. You don't wanna ask somebody to do something where they're wobbling all over the place and they don't feel successful when you're barking at them the whole time. I mean, not that I think you all would bark, but you know what I mean.
Once Jess put the wedge underneath where I needed it, the work became where I felt I was accomplishing something.
And that's the other piece. Single leg and single arm work, if you're doing a Scolio Pilates session, which is based on Schroth Physical Therapy, that's SCHROTH, invented by a woman named Christina Schroth in Germany. If you're doing a therapeutic session in physical therapy or with a Schroth physical therapy, some method based on that, that single arm and single leg work is crucial because you're trying to work two sides very differently to take an imbalance out. So, Maureen, remind me, which arm?
This is what I've got
This one.
issues with right now.
So here's what that would potentially look like if you stand up for me. Remember, which shoulder's more internally rotated? The right. And then this one kind of lives far back anyway.
I'm
So-
always going like this.
So something that we might do with single arm work, and if you can't do this, I'm just gonna demonstrate. You're gonna take your
Yeah.
hand and you're gonna cup your shoulder, and then you're gonna pretend like you've got a sunshine sticker, and it really does kinda have to be the sun. Because you're gonna bring that shoulder onto your back and you're gonna reach that elbow out to the side, and you're gonna ask yourself, if I put that sticker right here, right where the pec kinda goes into the underarm, are all the rays extended? Cause we live here. Some of those rays, like, they don't get to fan out.
This is norm.
Our sun is not symmetrical. So you wanna have sun, so it's gonna be out to the side, and then her left side, I might have her be pushing forward with something. So you might sit on a reformer, like on a box with the straps, and be pulling one spring out to the side while you're pushing on the other. So we're doing single leg, and you can do similar things with your legs. You'd be doing single leg or arm work, but here we're very intentional about it, and it's to bring something into balance and symmetry that isn't. For your work, I think single leg work on the reformer is probably fine, because that's closed chain. I would say proceed with caution if you see wobbling. But a lot of the single leg work that we do, like the mat style, I would just take it out. Because they're gonna wobble, and potentially any other asymmetries, like things that affect your SI joint, are gonna be more likely to be irritated. Do something else, and we're gonna get to the something else very soon, I promise. Same thing with arm work. Anything where the arms are working together, all of that's great, right? Like, do your offering, and just know that that right shoulder is not gonna play nice, so you're gonna be thinking about that. Things like chest expansion are fantastic. But if you think about work that a lot of us do from the caddy where we're standing, like boxing, this shoulder has a very different need than this shoulder. Boxing with my left would be great, the last thing in the world I need to be doing. Now, eventually, it will be a great exercise once I've learned how to keep this stupid shoulder on my back and not have my ribs rotate with it and everything else. But until somebody's pretty deep into it, I wouldn't do that. I would stick to both arms working together. Do you have anything else? And the final one is gonna be a full plank, which I know that you can do. I know that you can do it. But when you do it, I remember you telling me once that when you were on a plank on hands and toes, you had a little bit of pain. A little bit of pain, and that's really common because you're holding yourself up, right? You've got your hands anchored, you've got your feet anchored. So it's closed chain, but your whole body is lifted. And any place above or below one of the switches in the spine is a little vulnerable. And so you are asking a spine that has little switches in it to do something that can be very difficult. And for some people, they'll do it, but it'll hurt a little bit. So again, if you see somebody and they've got a pretty significant spinal curve, consider having them do a plank on their knees. Like, if they tell you that it hurts, that's why. It's not that they need to get stronger. They don't need a stronger core. They don't need a stronger upper back. They're just asking a spine that has a couple vulnerable points on it to do something really hard. I gave you all this picture because I know you all didn't come here for a history lesson, but I love this, and I do live in history a lot. So here's what we used to do for Pilates, and not for Pilates, for scoliosis, and the funny thing about it is they got a lot right. So you see the person who's attached to the ladder? Okay, so that's the Hippocratic ladder. The Greeks had this figured out. Of course, come to find out, the ancient Egyptians did braces, so we're not as smart as we think we are. And what is it the Babylonians did trig? Again, we're not as smart as we think we are. So they would hang people on the ladder, and then they would dangle them upside down, out a window, and shake them. The out a window was just for spectacle, but the rest of it actually made sense. When you're inverted like that, you're elongating your spine. Okay, so one of the fundamental principles about what should I do with a body that has spinal curvatures is axial elongation. Anything you can do to make that spine longer is going to pull it out of its curve as much as you can. Again, if it's structural, you're not going to get straight. Your goal is to get straighter. And then I love the one where the guy's laying down and the other person is standing on top. So one of them is addressing only the rotation, and one of them is addressing primarily only the side-to-side curve, but they were basically onto it. Okay. I want wanna show you, so we're gonna go over some exercises that are a good idea. I only listed a few, there are probably 100 more. That's why I gave you spots to think about it, and I thought we could even, brainstorm a little bit together. And then I'm gonna have Maureen show us the difference in her spine when she's just standing or sitting compared to doing an exercise that focuses on elongation. Because again, I can blather, but there's nothing quite like seeing it. Okay, footwork with an extreme midline emphasis. Finding your midline hug, anybody who's took a class from me has heard me talk about that a fair bit, because nothing makes my body feel better than that. It's hard, I'd rather not do it, but I sure feel better when I'm finished. Anything I'm working on where I am actively pressing those heels together and I'm feeling my thighs hug together and I'm feeling my hip bones skate in towards each other, that midline connection, and you can feel it through your ribs, you can tell yourself that you're feeling your underarms come closer together. If you're in a plank, you can tell yourself that your hands are coming in closer together. That's gonna pull you out of some curves. It's gonna help you elongate better if you're hugging in towards the middle. Almost every Schroth exercise involves at least one moment of feel everything pull in towards the middle. Feel everything pull in towards the middle.
Hug that imaginary ball.
Hug that, yeah, so I'm gonna tell them that cue in just a minute. Okay, chest expansion on all equipment, that's a great one. Remember I was saying, so single arm work, not such a great idea. But anything like chest expansion, it's great for two reasons. You're working on externally rotating, whichever side is internally rotated. On most people, because I told you that side bend left is more common, it's gonna be the right shoulder that's an issue. It won't be for everybody, but that's one where you get to work the arms together. The other thing is the emphasis on chest expansion, right? What are we telling people to do? When they pull back, what do they also do?
Tall.
They're trying to shoot their spine up to the ceiling, exactly. So it's, you got a great focus on elongation there. Okay, any mobility work to help open the chest and to de-internally rotate that right shoulder is gonna be great. If you've got somebody who has a significant kyphosis in their upper spine, it's gonna have to be tiny. You might not be able to do it all. And you might have to put a wedge underneath their upper chest to decrease that angle, to take them out of some of that kyphosis. I think Tiffany did that with a client recently, didn't you?
Well, the thing I told you about, I think, was the happy orangutan.
Oh, that's right, which I'm gonna show you in a minute. So shoulder mobility work is great, and then I have shoulder mobility twice because that's why you shouldn't be your own copy editor. I called it the Julie, the one where we were working on first just lift the forearm, then you pivot, and then you lift your head. I learned that from Julie Gaiman. I think it's a Brent Anderson. But since I wasn't 100% sure, we're just gonna give credit to Julie Gaiman, who had some really great like rehab based. And Holly, I know you've done a ton of additional work on shoulders and probably know 100 other things to do. But anything that works on chest opening and shoulder mobility is gonna make your client feel really good. Okay. So we already talked about any work that uses both arms at the same time. You can do it supine, I would start there. You can do it seated, you can do it standing. Elephant, and this is, you were describing elephant. Elephant on the reformer, you can modify it for the caddy, you can do it on core line. Anything where your client gets to have their hands on a ladder and they're in neutral spine and they're in sort of that downward facing dog position, oh boy, does that feel good. Because you're elongating, right, from pelvis to foot, and then again from the low back to the crown of your head. So you actually get to elongate in both directions. Your clients are gonna like that. And this is our focus, right? It's on anything that lets us feel better and also work our muscles symmetrically. Side splits on either the reformer or the core line are a great exercise. And I don't expect you to remember this, but in particular, whichever side of the lumbar is a little more concave than it should be, that's the side you want to pay more attention to. You're going to ask people to really drive down through that foot because they live here. Like I know, this is where I live. My hips are here. I'm a little bent in more on this side. This side isn't doing squat. If you ask me to push this leg down, those low back muscles on my right have to turn on, and I'm going to come out of that lordosis a little bit. But I will not like it. So Maureen, you can tell us about what happened with footwork on the reformer when I wedged you so that you were symmetrical.
Well, that's what I said before, I thought, I accused her of putting on another spring. I've always been strong in my low body, I've always
You
used
are, you're strong
three
everywhere.
reds and a blue and not breaking much of a sweat to do it, and it felt good. And when she wedged me, all of a sudden I was working way harder on my right leg, and I thought she'd put on an additional spring. And then she'd in actuality taken one off.
And it's because Maureen and I have the same curved shape. Our left side is where the weight is. So that side just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and the right side still wasn't picking up the slack. I have to
It
really
was just
think,
along for the ride.
yeah, just along for the ride. Like I started noticing a while ago after I did the work with Karina that when I was running, it's like, oh, you're landing heavier with that left foot than you are the right. Maybe you need to pay attention to that.
So in that scenario, would you, we talk a lot about like staying even in the body, so would you
It's mine.
work one side more than the other? Like if you were doing side splits on the reformer, would you do a few more reps on the weaker side?
Not necessarily. I would just ask them, it's a really good question. I would just ask them to put extra emphasis on that right
The side that we know
side
that's weak.
leg, because whether it's moving out or it's on the platform and it's the stabilizer, it's not doing its job either way.
Okay.
Now, again, in a Schroth session, they might work that a little differently. Although as I think about side splits, they don't differentiate. I'm gonna have Maureen demonstrate a couple of exercises, so we're gonna skip ahead to the very end here, and then we'll flip back. Any of the ab series where both legs are working at the same time is a fantastic idea. So there is no ab series exercise that I love more than double leg stretch, and it's because it's working axial elongation. You're reaching both arms, you're reaching both legs. It's a great opportunity to find your midline. Your clients will pull out of their curves a little bit. Anything where you're working separately, like single leg stretch or leg pull, single straight leg stretch, proceed with caution. It might not be what that body really needs. These double straight leg stretch, that's another really great one. If you have somebody who doesn't have any osteoporosis or osteopenia, you're not gonna wanna do crisscross. We already live in one side, the other side's gonna be too much. Like even just doing that, and I barely have anything, it's like, oh, it doesn't really, that's not my favorite. I can do it, but it's not my favorite. And I just said add your own, and if we have time at the end, we can brainstorm a few more. I hope that gave you the basic idea of what you wanna think about when you're coming up with exercises, which is how much of a focus is there on using both arms together, both legs together, coming out of internal rotation in your shoulder. And there are a few others that we'll now demonstrate with Maureen. So one of them, and I feel comfortable teaching you this one. Do you have a question?
Well, it's just kind of a general question, because I know you come several times a week. You obviously, you know everything that you,
I've lived with it for quite a few years, and
Can I
I know it
scoot you
feels
down
good.
there, Ann, real quick?
It doesn't feel good. Pilates has helped me more than all the physical therapy I've had for all the many things that have gone wrong with me over the years.
so
To
when
the,
you,
to the point where my orthopedic surgeon a year ago wrote on his orders that I was to continue with Pilates,
okay,
so.
so when you come in, for instance, to her reformer class, do you just grab a couple things to set yourself up?
I do now that we've
Now
kind of
that you know.
focused in on
Right.
the things that I need to do in order to correct the things that I
Okay.
haven't been doing, that I've been doing because I'm a stubborn old broad, but don't necessarily feel the best.
This is another reason why I love Maureen, is because I so can tap into that. I don't care if that's like not good for me. I'm gonna do the thing.
If that's what you think I need to do, then damn it, I'll do it.
But it was fascinating for me when you said that the leg work suddenly felt harder. It was
Yeah.
like, oh,
That was an eye opener. I really did think you put a green spring on. I really did.
I was in that class, I remember you
yeah.
saying
And
that.
as I have had this revelation many times, it's like, oh, it's like this stuff works. You know, it's like you read it, you teach it, and then you see it actually work in a body, and you're like, I really shouldn't be surprised. All right, anybody who's done any or seen any of the buff bone chair work, the vast majority of that is fantastic, and I'm just gonna show you two quick exercises. So Maureen's gonna sit in her folding chair. And the first one is breathing tall. So, and you can all do this too as well. You're gonna plant your feet on the floor, you're gonna make sure they're parallel, they're 6 thumb distance apart, you're gonna sit right on top of your 6 thumb. So exactly, Jen, you're gonna scooch a little further forward. Yeah, you're not gonna sit like that, Becky, I know you just slid, but it's like, yeah, no Super Bowl couch sitting. So, when you think about your breath, I want you to think about, there are 2 metaphors, they're both corny, I kinda love both of them. Your inhales are gonna be really small, I wanna say that at the beginning. You wanna take just a small sip of air. Sometimes we overcoach that inhale, and we run people to a little hyperventilation, it's not so cool. But when you take that sip of air, let your belly expand, like really, maybe just once take the sip and let it all go. I know none of us wants to do that, right? But when you take your breath, feel your belly expand first, and feel that breath travel all the way up your spine, and you're gonna try to use it to help you lift your spine. You're gonna imagine each bone can hover off of the one below it, one at a time. Now when you exhale, that air is gonna leave in the opposite direction. It's gonna leave your throat, through your upper ribs, lower ribs, and the absolute last thing to empty out is gonna be your belly. Your inhale is gonna be much lower than your exhale. You wanna focus on letting all the air out, okay? So we're gonna take a small sip of air again. You're gonna press your feet into the floor. You're gonna press your hands into your thighs, and you're gonna use that opposition as you inhale to lift your spine. And then when you exhale, that little muscle activation that comes on with exhalation so often, you're gonna try to use that to keep your spine lifted, to try to not. Here are the 2 metaphors that might help your clients feel this. The first is the breath. Picture your spine as like a 7-story department store. You want your breath to start in like housewares in the basement, and it's gonna be like an elevator. It's gonna go up 1 floor at a time until you're at customer service and gift wrap, the very top floor. And you're gonna reverse it in the opposite direction.
What is a department store?
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. What is a department store? So one of my
I
clients,
love young people.
well, for 2 reasons, right? Like A, what is a department store, and B, COVID. Like none of us have been in one anyway. Another image, and this is one that Ellen's physical therapist used, was to imagine that you're breathing through a straw, right? And just like if you drink through a straw, you pull from the bottom of that cup and the liquid travels up the straw. You wanna really feel the breath travel up your spine. And then when you let that air out, you're gonna exhale through that straw. So again, it's gonna be very mindful, and it's gonna be very incremental. But again, you want the focus to be on letting all of the air out. Then you can play with your hand positions, right? You can put your hands on your ribs as you do this, and you can feel that maybe the hands on the ribs are helping you to coach either a little bit more fullness through the ribs, or you can also kind of traction yourself up a tiny bit with those hands. Then you can move hands back down to your hips. Ironically, hips are a little harder for some people, so you would think you would go bottom to top, but it doesn't always go in that direction. Take your sip of air and try to lift everything. And then you're gonna, again, try to use that exhalation. The air leaves top to bottom, but you're trying not to let your spine collapse. Here's my favorite of the version. If anybody's having a little back pain or tenderness at this point in time, you're finished. But if they're not, you're gonna take your hands and you're gonna put your fingers, you're gonna cradle that occipital ridge, and your thumbs are gonna come on the mandible. And you're gonna let those elbows come a little bit forward, because 99% of us, when our elbows are out to the side, you saw my rib flare. The minute I bring those elbows a little further forward, I can snuggle those ribs back. Think about, you're not really gonna pull on your head. Think about like a 10% effort to just traction your head and your neck a little bit. And as you breathe up, you've got a little extra help here. And then you're gonna exhale, and you're gonna let all of that air sink down. That's gonna help your clients find lift and find elongation. It's actually a great exercise whether you have spinal curves or not. And that's another thing is, other than the very intentional, one-sided things, everything is great for all bodies. And in fact, that midline hug is really good for any of your clients that are hypermobile, right? And I think we all have a couple clients where their joints are really hypermobile, like, you know, they can spin their legs out in directions I can only imagine. They will get better control of that, they will find more control. I mean, mobility is great, I wish I had more of it. They'll find more control of that if they're doing that midline hug. It's really great for any of those syndromes. The other thing you can do, and this is from the Beth Bones chair repertoire, is you can consider focusing your breath on one side and then the other. So if you'll hinge forward, I'm gonna place this band right around the middle of your ribs and try to get it flat, but it's been cleaned a lot, so it's starting to kind of scrunch up. And you're gonna hold the band, not too taut, you want it to, yeah, so you feel ease up just a little bit, yeah. And hold it in one hand, so you're cradling one rib more than the other. And you're gonna take an inhale, and Maureen's gonna try to focus on filling her right side. Actually, the way you have it, yeah, and that's probably kinda hard.
It is.
It is, cause the right side is the one
Would it help if I stood?
that is a little, not necessarily. What I would do though, is I would hold it off to the side. And again, your goal here is you don't want the band already, you want it taut but not yet stretched. So choke up a little bit higher. I'm sorry.
Oh, let go.
Yeah, more slack. Thank you. And your goal is to try to just feel your ribs expand into that band. Yeah, there you go.
Actually, I think you take it, have her hold it with her left hand and
Yeah,
breathe
well,
into
that's
her
what I was,
right.
I think
Yeah.
the issue is,
Yeah.
and that's what we're doing right now, is we're trying to hold in the left, but that little shoulder thing is.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, cause you're right, so you would be holding the band like so you'd be
Yeah.
holding it.
Want me to try to hold it with my right hand?
No, it would be, if you're focusing on that right rib, you actually do hold on the left.
But you can't, so.
Yeah. Actually, she is. Just not as far out to the side as we
Yeah.
would, cause that rotation doesn't feel great.
This is the one that hurts.
Oh,
So I
well
can
then,
rotate up
yeah.
here all day long.
So let me get you more even. And let me get you more even.
No,
It's a
my right-
lateral shift, so what it does, and the reason we do it in osteoporosis is because the friction of breathing hard into your rib cage can actually improve the bone.
So let go.
But it's a great thing for scoliosis
You're gonna hold
because
that
you're
side.
helping her enlarge the side where she's
Okay.
compressed. Is that making sense?
But the friction is it too.
Yeah.
Right, because
Right.
if you've got that
The
side bend,
The side that she's compressed is where she's leaning towards,
She's not leaning towards it,
Not
she's
leaning,
breathing
but-
into it.
but the vertebrae are
Yeah,
going
so
in
she's
that
trying to
direction. Yeah,
breathe
okay.
right, draw in right.
Yeah.
Breathe right, draw in right, yeah.
and now Maureen is gonna take the bands and she's gonna hold it in the right hand. If you can slack up a little bit, cause you're already pulled quite tight. And she's gonna try to fill this left side. And remember, that's where those ribs live a little closer together and they often will even angle down. But in Maureen's case, the chamber of the thorax is a little fuller on this side. And so you told me like, did you say it felt easier to breathe onto the left? Do it again? That's actually not what I'm feeling, I felt like it was more on this side.
It helps sometimes if you put your hand on the
Yeah,
side you're trying
on
to
the back.
breathe in.
So that's another great exercise, and Holly was saying it's great for osteoporosis because you can help promote bone growth.
Bless you.
Living in a curve can also make, that lack of oxygen, right? Like things can get kind of brittle and sticky. So it has all the same benefits in addition to just trying to work on your oxygen capacity. All the same. Okay, so let's go back. So that's your breathing tall. I think I have jellyfish breathing in there as well. Jellyfish breathing is really simple. A lot of your clients, and you know, when they breathe, they only breathe like in one dimension. So you just want to picture yourself as a jellyfish and try to expand your breath side to side, front to back, top to bottom. Right, you're trying to expand with that inhalation in all directions. And this is where the classical Pilates breath is not so great. Because it tends to tell you, like, don't expand your ribs. No, you don't want to blow them, but they need to expand. That's, or, you know, don't let the belly get bigger. Oh, no, actually, that's not such a great idea either. All right, it
What
feels,
is happy arena?
that's what we're gonna do next.
Okay.
I'm
So
so
you
glad
showed
you
a
asked.
demonstration.
Elizabeth, can I have you scooch out to the side, because I think I can work it from here and everybody will be able to
You want
see.
the green or the orange?
Are you gonna be able, is this gonna feel okay?
We'll give it a whirl.
Okay. All right, so a wonderful cue, and this is one of Karina's cues, is butt ball 2-year-old, which is encouraging people to be in their deep low abs with a great midline pop. So Karina's just saying, key for just about anything when you're trying to get into the midline. She's gonna turn on her tush. And I would stand, can you stand in Pilates first position for me so that you can really get those heels pressed into each other? Yeah, so she's gonna turn on her tush, that's the butt. She's gonna pretend like she's squeezing the ball between her inner thighs, that's really getting into that midline hug. And then Karina always talks about the little 2-year-old punch to the stomach. So you've engaged your abs enough that your pelvis shifts back a tiny bit, right? It might be like a little bit of pubic bone forward, but you don't wanna collapse. It's not like you've done a pelvic tilt without lengthening your back bones. So we're gonna be standing tall, we're in our midline, we're in our deep low abdominals. And then she's gonna take a hold of this TheraBand with just a little bit of tension about eye level. And then I want you to go kind of slack for us. And you can see Maureen's curves, right? She's got a little shift to the left here through her hip. Her side does that little, she's italicized, and the little italics, it moves to the right, and then it comes back left, and then it swings back a little bit here. She's gonna keep her elbows wide if you can, and on an exhale, she's gonna do that little midline hug, so butt ball 2-year-old, and reach those arms out to the side and shoot your spine up to the ceiling. Can you see how that differential decreased dramatically? And then lift the arms back up. You'll see that in a lot of exercises. And then, if you remember me talking about that Hippocratic ladder, I think did everybody see? If you think about that Hippocratic ladder, they were also shaking the body. The out the window was just for effect. The shaking of the body is because any perturbation of the bones is gonna help promote growth. So in Maureen's case, because she's such a strong mover, I might at this stage of the game ask her to hold all of this and then start pounding her heels. Because we're gonna promote the bone and some little muscle work.
I just wanna watch all that fat.
In
shit.
$10 in the jar, Maureen.
I know. I own the damn jar.
You do. And so the final thing that I wanted to show you, so there I think you've got a really great, I hate being short. I think you've got a great illustration of how when you focus on elongation, you can literally watch curves come out of the body. We're gonna end today, I mean, I'll stay for questions, of course, but in terms of Maureen's time.
Nobody ever calls me. So far, my brother called me. And my husband just called. I never get a phone call.
I'm only important when I'm not around.
So this is a K2 wedge, and the Scolio Pilates folks sell them. And if you all don't mind, we're gonna need to shift this way. Unless you all have way better than I do.
You want me to?
And this is something that, you know, I'm not teaching you wedging, and I'm gonna explain why in a couple minutes. This is the exception. Any one of you that wants to grab out my K2 wedge, have at it if you've got a client who's got some curves, because wait till you see what happens. I'm gonna ask Maureen to put her hip crease right at the edge, and you can see this little ledge here is to help support the pelvis. And then her trunk is going to be slightly inverted. So think about that in terms of gravity. This is our hanging that ladder upside down to elongate. Okay, so you're gonna come. You're gonna put your hip crease right here. She's gonna lengthen down. She's gonna stack her hands and be comfortable. People who have a significant upper back kyphosis are gonna need a second wedge to decrease that incline. Again, this is a case where people tell you, that's a great stretch, back it off, it's too much. We're gonna put her in a frog position. Her heels are gonna be together. Her knees are gonna open out pretty far to the side. And you can just look at this body right now and see we haven't done anything more than put it on a slight inversion. And you can see, so I'm gonna put my hand on her right rib and on her left rib. There's still a difference, but it's less. Remember what it looked like standing? I'm gonna put my hand on Maureen's. We're doing a great job with social distancing, aren't we?
Yes, you are.
On
I
her,
had one shot and I work with junior high students.
on her left lumbar and her right lumbar. And I can feel a difference, but I bet you can't see much. And so honestly, just laying here and breathing deeply, breathing up, even though you're inverted, is gonna help pull you out of those curves. You can imagine this with anything, right? Like think about like the slinky, right? You can pull the curve out of the slinky. You can pull it out of a hair that has a curl to it. Elongation is gonna bring you out of this.
This feels good, by the way.
Yeah, that's the other thing is clients love this. And Karina told me that, and then I put a couple clients on it and they were just like, this feels so good. If you felt like just having your client lay on a slab of foam, like you feel like maybe you shouldn't be charging them for that, and let me just tell you, it feels really great, so charge them for that. But if you wanted to get fancy with it, and this came from the Buff Bone sequencing series, you could do some little face floats here. And what I would do, because some people are still gonna crank their neck, is right now Maureen's right hand is stacked on top of her left. I'd ask her to do a small face float, keeping her hand attached to that forehead as she lifts up. And it's just gonna be the tiniest little movement.
You what?
Remind me, which arm is okay?
My right arm does not feel good.
Okay, so then stack so that your left is on top.
You want that?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can play with that, and whichever hand is on top, the elbow comes with it. This isn't from the core Buff Bone sequencing, but Rebecca did kind of a second series on the mat. And then you could restack the hands. The other thing you can do, and honestly this is also great for everybody, is you can play with lifting a leg. Except Maureen's gonna think about lifting from the underbutt, and she's gonna think more about lengthening it than lifting it. It's a fine thing to do on this side, but this side's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Because that's where she's
Sometimes it hurts.
a little more orthotic. So if it hurts, don't do
Oh,
it.
I mean, it's not hurt, it's harder.
It's harder
It's
because-
much harder.
Because the muscles in her lumbar on that right side are not as strong as the one on
This
the left.
side's no effort.
Yeah, see this side, easy peasy. This side,
Oh, okay.
yeah, is taking some work. But when she does it, can you see how, I'm gonna put my hands here. Let me get them even and lift that right leg again. See how the hand floated up with it? We've got her inverted so she's longer. We're activating the muscle on this side and it's lifting that low back up. We're taking her a little bit out of that inversion.
What's the purpose for the external rotation?
That's so that you can get your pelvis just flat on
Okay.
that wedge. You don't want somebody to be anterior, exactly, exactly. When you ask them to come up off that wedge, you're gonna ask them to do it really slowly. Cause as you know, and of course you're not gonna do any inversion with somebody who's got blood pressure issues or glaucoma, like all the normal contraindications apply. I know that was a lot in 2 hours. I'm kind of amazed that we finished on time.
It was brilliant.
I don't know how you did that.
So helpful.
I am happy, so the short version of why we're not playing with wedges, which are used, if you've got a couple more minutes, I will show you how we wedge Marine, just so that you know at least what the heck we're talking about. Do you have a couple minutes? Sure. I'll show you real quick. So Marine's gonna lie down on her back, hook line position, knees up to the ceiling. And I think I already put these in the I need to clean them pile. Is there a second one just like this laying around?
Not there.
That'll work. Perfect, perfect. So it's gonna be the opposite of how I wedged you. Since I know that Marine's right rib extends further back, you can see, right, that her left rib is up closer to the ceiling than her right? So we're gonna take care of that. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't go in that direction. And you should have a neck pillow too. Can I give you a neck pillow? Oh, you don't,
Well, I'm good, actually, since the surgery, it's okay.
is it? Well, let's just,
That's a little bit much.
it is a little bit much. All right, we'll
How
just
do
be
you live
fast.
without it?
We'll just be fast. All right, so you can tell that this hip is a little bit
Yeah.
lower than this one, right? So I'm gonna take this wedge and I'm gonna have her roll to her right. And we're gonna put this in right around like a little bit of the low back and the innominate. And then we're gonna come up, and this is where, the reason why I'm not teaching you wedging is when I was taught how to do this, it was wrong. Come on down. Yes, I did wedge her ribs and that's what I was taught, but I was taught to put it straight in. And then I went to this clinic and it's like, that's gonna feel terrible. You wanna aim towards the underarm. The other issue is you gotta know how many curves does this person have? Where do those curves live? There's a different curve. There's a different pillow for a C curve than an S curve. I'm gonna show you real quickly. See how this one is longer? That's because you've got that longer thoracic curve, so it needs a longer wedge. The skinny one won't feel well. For any man, some women, but every man, this is gonna be the one that goes under the pelvis, because otherwise they're gonna lay on it, it's gonna go shoop, and it's gonna be like an inch, maybe, of fabric. And then the final piece is, let me grab a triangle wedge out of the box. No, I don't do the great circle route here. because Maureen and I both have that right shoulder that's a little bit more internally rotated, we're gonna take the triangle wedge and we're gonna put it underneath her left, which lives more external, and you can tell that that helps to draw the right down. Now, the other principle of wedging is, it is not passive, which was kind of the other thing I was taught. It's like, well, you wedge it and you're done, perfect. No, no, no. The wedge is supposed to help your client find neutral. So for Maureen, I'm gonna walk around again. I would actually take my hands, and it's not a lift, it's just kind of a tickle. And I would kind of curl them up right here to try to encourage, right? That left hip to lift up a little bit, which is gonna help her right hip dip down. And then I'm gonna take my hands in the opposite direction. I'm gonna try to work the ribs opposite. And it's a very active process. And then if we were really working the Schroff therapy, Maureen, I'm gonna take you through it just one session so they can see what it looks like. You're gonna take an inhale and you're gonna feel a little bit of lift on that left side and a little bit of drop on the right. You're gonna exhale, you're gonna skateboard your hip bones together. Yep. You're gonna take an inhale, you're gonna feel a little bit of a lift underneath that right rib and a little bit of a sink on the left. And then you're gonna exhale and you're gonna skateboard those ribs together. Beautiful. You're gonna take an inhale and feel as long as you can. You're gonna exhale and you're gonna try to shift your hips a little bit to the right. You're gonna take another big inhale and you're gonna try to shift your ribs a little bit to the left. And then Maureen, we wouldn't work on her neck because her neck has been caged, so she doesn't really have the issues that you would see. But when you're working this again, it's active on the wedges, which is why we're not going into this, because I'm just now trying to get a handle on this and I'm like 30 hours in, is you de-rotate the spine, you work from the bottom to the top. First you de-rotate, then you work the side to side, except for the neck, because God forbid that should be simple. The neck, you do in the opposite direction. You do the side to side tilt first, and then you do the rotation. So it's really hard just to do this, especially if you're standing, which is something Maureen and I have done. And if you want, Maureen, you wanna stand up and we'll show them how much curve you can take out of your body with this? And then if you have questions, I'm happy to
Can we
stay.
just talk about how beautiful you did that? I
Oh,
mean,
it was
it was amazing to watch that.
Oh, she's,
Well, I mean, because you
Yeah.
add your normal strength to that proper wedging, you knocked it out of the park. It was just cool to see.
and that's why Maureen is
Yeah.
like the perfect person for me to work with, because
Yeah.
here I've got somebody who has enough of a curve that there's something to work with, but who's a beautiful Pilates practitioner. There aren't many of those, like, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
This is why Marina's my practice client. It's like, oh, you can do all the things.
Yeah, Pilates has really changed my life.
You changed Pilates.
So let's stand
Changed
up.
my life.
And you're just gonna, so take a moment and just like move your arms and move your legs and
Should
let
I
like,
stand the way I normally would?
exactly. The whole point of it is like,
Oh my.
find your schlump.
Yeah.
Embrace the schlump for just a moment.
When I had a child, it was really easy to put it on the hip, you know, it was like. oh,
Exactly.
It's already, it's
Well,
already
the hip's
there.
already here.
The seat's already there.
So she's gonna find her natural schlump and just sink into it. Let gravity do its thing. Notice how one knee is straighter than the other? And one foot's Okay, so she's gonna press both feet into the floor. She's gonna find her little butt ball 2-year-old, right? She's gonna turn on her tush. She's gonna hug an imaginary ball between her thighs. She's gonna try to lift her spine up, even as she's feeling her hip bones skateboard side to side to get into those deep low abdominals. All right, it's been a long day. Let's hope I can do this without screwing up. I'm gonna have to do it on myself too at the same time. She's gonna take an inhale and she's gonna feel her left hip come a little bit forward and her right hip move back. She's gonna exhale, she's gonna skateboard her hip bones together. She's gonna take another inhale and she's gonna feel her ribs rotate a little bit to the left. She's gonna exhale and skateboard those
That's
ribs
harder.
together. It is harder, I agree. And then of course what happens is you let go of the bottom when you're at the top. We're gonna return to the bottom, we're gonna take an inhale and lift all back bones, we're gonna exhale, we're gonna hug everything together, ribs, underarms, feet, all of it. Now she's gonna take another inhale, and she's gonna feel her hips glide a tiny bit to the right, because they live to the left. She's gonna exhale, she's gonna bring those sits bones together. She's gonna inhale, she's gonna glide her ribs a little bit to the left, because they live, and then she's gonna exhale and bring everything together one last time. And that looks like a little bit of nothing, but I promise you it's exhausting.
I can see her working.
It's a
Yeah.
big deal.
It's exhausting, and then she's just gonna let it go. Thank you so much, my friend. Thank
Yay.
you.
That was
Oh,
awesome.
Thank you. Anybody
you.
that